right, season 4, episode 1. So, hey, we are video, which is awesome. That's really cool. The bad news is I don't have a face for video, so I apologize for our audience that is watching video. April, on the other hand, you look beautiful. You look great. You look glowing. You look like you had great sleep, had a good
Oh my
breakfast.
word.
Yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
sure
word.
you've been kicking already this morning, haven't you?
For quite a while. I'm almost halfway through a workday already. It's great.
Holy moly! Oh wow. Okay, so guys, for those who's listening, and no one can see the time, but believe me, it's not. Some people are just starting their day, so let's try to remove a little judgment from your voice there a little bit, April.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to be on video too. You know me, I love video, so I'm all about like, let's just record. So I'm excited. I hope that our listeners, our viewers are excited too. Hopefully they can connect with us more, get to see a little bit more of our personalities. However, I am a little nervous because I do talk a lot with my face. So when you say things that are, off the wall, now I have to watch my facial expressions. So I'm gonna have to kind of be self-controlled in that area, but I think it'll
Yeah,
work out. I think it'll be
yeah,
fine.
or not. Be yourself. Like that's okay. That's cool to do that. I mean, just don't cuss me out by your facial expressions. That would be awesome.
Never that. Never that. I'm excited. What's so cool is like we're starting something new kind of on the podcast today, adding this video component. And we're actually going to be talking about podcasting this entire month because we love podcasting and we thought it'd be a good idea just to give you guys sort of a behind the scenes look at our process. You guys know we just started the podcast just a few months ago, and many of you are thinking about a podcast or wanting to elevate your podcast. And it's going to be neat for you guys to kind of just see our thought process behind podcasting and what we think it takes to make a great podcast. And when I think about just podcasting in general, Mitchell, I don't know about you, but I automatically think about why. Like, why are you starting a podcast? Before anyone starts a podcast, you have to really know why you're starting a podcast because that's the thing that's going to keep you motivated, right? Podcasting is not for the faint of heart. We know that to be successful, you got to be committed. You got to trial and error. You got to say, all right, we're doing this. And there will be days when you will question, why am I doing this? But knowing your motivation, knowing your why, it's going to keep you going. And it's also going to guide you in your decision-making process because every podcast is different. The type of podcast, the length it is, having guests, not having guests, the formats. There's so many decisions that are made when you're developing your podcast. And it's easy to just pick and choose what you think is popular. But I think it's so important to let your why even guide those decisions. So, what are your thoughts, Mitchell, around just podcasting and really knowing your why as being a foundation of building a really great podcast?
So, I mean, the why specifically for me on the why, I love to connect. And we've said it a lot with our business. The best part about We Dream is us and being able to connect and, whichever way we could do it. And podcast is a great way to connect. So I think that's probably number one. Number two, we're always looking for content, and we've had a lot of discussions about this. So I may be selling some points later on. So, but we're always looking for content, and this is a great way to make easy content. I mean, there's a ton of AI tools that could help you out with that. And so we'll probably get into that. I'm going to stop talking about that because I know we are about to. But the whole thing behind why, I mean, if you don't have a good why, you're going to be kind of lost. It's going to change without knowing it changed. And you might land on something that works out great, but you have no idea how you got there, and it'll be hard to replicate because your why is kind of, not fully formed. So, anyways, that's just my quick thoughts on it.
No, I love it. And our why, I mean, we both love media, number one. We love stories. We love to see brands be successful. So it just makes sense for us to create a podcast around this idea of elevating your brand using media. And in addition to knowing your why, and in addition to us knowing our why, we have to also identify who it is that we're speaking to, right? We're speaking to entrepreneurs, people of influence, people that want to get their story out, to make their mark using media. And when we recognize who we're speaking to, what they're interested in, what their challenges are, what their goals are, that is really going to help us create a podcast that serves their needs. And that's what podcasting is. It's serving, right? It's not just talking in a microphone. It's not just posting content. It is literally a vehicle that you can use to serve your people. So maybe you're listening and you never thought to even have a podcast, but you recognize, wait a minute, I do want to serve my people to a greater level. I want to elevate the way that I serve. I want to use my story to serve. Podcasting is such a great way, knowing who you're going to talk to, why you're doing it, what they want. Like, it all is so connected. Mitchell, I love to hear your thoughts on just knowing the person that you're speaking to. I know for us, as we work with clients, that's usually one of the questions that we ask them, because you can do the same thing 1,000 different ways. And depending on who you're trying to reach, that should determine kind of the direction that you're going in.
I love the idea of serving your audience. I love that idea. I think when talking to our clients in the past and seeing their disconnect of I don't have anything really to say. I mean, my business isn't that interesting. I love my business. I love this. I love that about it. They give you a laundry list of things that they love about it. But as far as, putting a spotlight on it and highlighting it and making it, on stage, I guess, in a way, some people, not everyone, you're definitely not this person for sure. But some people tend to pull back and think that, they're, to be honest with you, I'm kind of like that, to be honest. So it's really cool to have these conversations with our clients and say that, this is a story worth telling. You have something to say about this, whether you're in finance or whether you're in real estate or whether you're in retail, whatever it is, but you have a thing to say. You have a story. You have the story of how the business started. You have a story about what your day looks like. You have, and everything in between. And then the idea on serving, we go into business because we're trying to solve a problem. There's a thing that there's a gap, and we have a way to fill that gap. And connecting your product, your service that you provide, and connecting that to a way you can serve your customer base, your client base, is a great way. It's kind of a great vehicle to get to the destination.
Yeah, I love that. And as people are putting their stories out there and using podcasting and using media, I feel like it gives them a greater sense of brand identity, so to speak. When I say brand identity, I'm actually thinking of people identifying with their brand. It's like, now that I'm hearing your story, I'm hearing how you can serve, I hear the problem that you solve, I see the solution that you're offering, I can connect with that. I can identify with that. And if you think about those things when you're creating your podcast, that's going to help you be more memorable. That's going to help you create ideas that are easy for your people to remember, right? You can have the most wonderful podcast, but if at the end of the podcast you don't remember one thing we said, what are we doing here, right? We want you to walk away even from this episode knowing that, man, there are just some foundational things I need to think about as I'm starting a podcast. We want you to walk away saying, okay, I got to know my why and who I'm talking to, and recognize that, man, this podcast is a way for people to identify with my brand and with me. Like, these are things we want our people, our audience, our clients to walk away with. And we want you to be thinking about that. We want you to be thinking about that. And then, of course, there's the practical things like the name, your cover art, your tagline, your intro, your outro music. And we love helping people to identify what those things are. But at the very core of the podcast, it's more of I like to think of it as like the framework, right? When I think about the music and the podcast art and the format and all of that, I like that. I think about that as being like the bells and the whistles, the paint on the wall, the appliances in the kitchen. But it's like at the very core of this house you're building. Like if your foundation isn't solid, then your podcast probably isn't going to last. And we want you to create things that last. I'm just saying.
Listen,
Besides,
let me
go ahead,
let me
Mitchell.
just
Go ahead.
let me just chime in real quick.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm realizing is we do this a lot as the other one is talking. And it's funny, like seeing it in video now, people are going to realize like me really get into this stuff. But that's kind of what I was going to talk about too. You talked about branding and what that looks like. You know, when you're thinking about what your podcast looks like, you know, you have your why at least framed out enough. And then you start thinking about maybe, you know, what the actual podcast looks like and how you would, you know, would you just go in guns blazing, shoot from the hip? Or would you read off a teleprompter? Would you have an outline? Would you go point 1, point 2, point 3? But that's a part of your brand. I mean, if you're in the finance world and you have a office culture of excellence, of I's dotted, T's crossed, everything is planned out, everything is sorted, everything is super organized. Well, maybe that's what your podcast needs to look like. If that's your brand, if that's one of the kind of core values of your business, then okay, well that your podcast should mirror that. If you're a realtor and you play it fast and loose and, you know, you're all about the connection, you're all about the personality, well, that's maybe what your podcast needs to look like. So just, you know, you talked about brand and you talked about what a podcast looks like. I think all that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I would love to just maybe really quickly think about some questions people may be thinking about. And the good thing is there's no right or wrong answer to these questions, but it's like in the back of people's mind. For example, Mitchell, people say, should I do a solo podcast or should I have a co-host? What do you think?
I think it totally depends on the host. Yeah, who's doing it. If you can sit in a room by yourself and just kind of talk or talk to a camera and you fill up the time and you don't need that feedback like yourself, then awesome, do that. If you require feedback, if you need someone to play off of, then co-host, have a guest on a regular basis. I mean, so yeah, I think it totally depends on who's producing the podcast for sure.
Totally agree. All right, next one. Should I do short episodes, like 15 minutes, or should I do like long hour episodes?
Man, so also I don't want you just to agree. I want to know your opinions on these things, okay? but long or short form. I mean, I don't want to keep going to depends, but it kind of depends. I mean, if you're forcing yourself to do an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, because some of these podcasts you see, I mean, go up to a really long amount of time. What you probably, if you're able to go in and re-engineer or de-engineer it, then you're able to see that the person that's hosting the podcast is excellent at asking questions, is excellent at pivoting. And if you're not that way, then okay, switch to short. Now, if you're like me, who clearly can talk a lot, if I don't have April who kind of guides me through, then I'm going to start talking about my driveway needs some new gravel or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just going to go all over the place. So maybe I talk a lot, but maybe short form is actually best for me if I was to do this by myself or have someone I could come off of. So
I love it. There's no right or wrong. So I agree with everything you said. I will add this though. Another thing to think about is considering your audience too. So if you have a business that you cater to busy moms, if you have a podcast that's like 60 minutes long, there's no way they're going to be listening to that. I mean, they might in a few chunks, but if your audience is like fast on the go, then you need shorter episodes. Vice versa, if you have an audience that wants that longer deep dive, even if it's uncomfortable for you, you may want to consider that, taking that deep dive if that is what your audience wants. And you might think, how do you know? I'm like Mitchell, start off with what you feel like jives with your personality. But I would say as time goes on and you're getting feedback from your audience, don't be afraid to pivot. You may not need to. I'm just saying, don't be afraid to, if that makes sense.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, I think a good entrepreneur pivots when the market changes and when the atmosphere changes, when the job market changes, whatever, however it fits. But it's not necessarily giving up on what your, niche is. It's not necessarily that. I mean, now I still want, I think you would agree, you still need to love it. You still need to be devoted to it. And it might be new and it's hard because it's new, but it shouldn't be hard because, man, this just does not fit and I'm having to force this. But I think that's different. I think that's a totally different word you would use. I don't think you would use pivot. I think you would use something else. But pivoting is you're playing the same game. You're playing the same play, maybe even, but you're just kind of pivoting your direction a little bit. So I think pivot's a good word there.
Yeah. All right. Last one, audio or video.
I mean, if you're me, audio is the only option until you have friends that want to, switch over to video. No, I mean, honestly, I love video. I mean, a part of, again, I'm kind of leaning more on, the person. And I'm finding that out with all of my answers just now after you pivoted to audience, which was a great point. But, like a part of what makes me work is my hands, is my facial expressions, is my body language. And that's how I sell a lot of things that I'm saying, whether it's a joke or whether it's a point or whatever. And so I would probably lean, as opposed to people's thoughts and feelings about it, is video and audio. But again, I think I think if you have video, it's a little bit more attractive when people are scrolling and they're looking at the content that you're posting. I think audio can still work, but I think video is probably, I lean more on video, just the way my brain works. But what do you have to say about that?
So I would say if you are thinking about starting a podcast, you go for the path of least resistance. Because some of you are like, I want to start a podcast, but you can't even think about the idea of being on video, or you are not ready to explore what that would require as far as equipment, things like that, time, because editing is different and things like that. So I would say if you're in that boat, don't feel like you can't start just because you have to start with audio. Clearly, you guys who started with audio here on the podcast, because that was the path of least resistance for us to get started. And when we felt ready, we switched over to video. So I just want you to know that the path of least resistance is what I always recommend. However, obviously, I love video as well. Video is obviously my first option, but I don't want that to stop you from getting started. So many people have so many great ideas, including podcasting. And because they don't have all the bells and whistles on day one, they stay on day 0. And I'm like, well, the bells and whistles might be on day 53, but you still on day 0, you're going to have to go to day 1 to get to day 53. So just be encouraged. If you are feeling that nudge to start a podcast and you don't feel like you have all the bells and whistles to start with the video, my recommendation would be to just start with what you have. I don't know about you. I started my podcast with a cell phone sitting on my couch, literally. And now we're on year 7. And so, you got to start.
No, that is so, so good. There's a saying, and I'm going to botch it, but it's something about how it's much easier to steer a vehicle while it's moving than when it's staying still. And actually, if you even try to turn the steering wheel while it's not moving, it's hard. Definitely if it's not turned on. But even when it's on, it's hard to turn it. But when you're going down the road, it's a lot more freer. And I think that's a great analogy. And as someone who writes with a permanent marker, referring back to a previous podcast, as someone who writes with a pencil, I tend to lean on, okay, no, I've set up a camera today. I wanted my background to look right. Really, I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with the lighting in here or whatever. But my good old bud April over here, I was like, no, let's get this going. Let's figure this thing out. Let's just start moving, and thank God for people like you, because if it wasn't, then, all of us other types of people will be just, not doing anything. So that's a great point. Just get going. Just just start going.
Yeah, I love it. It takes all the people, Mitchell, to make the world go round. So I'm glad we're a partner. I'm glad we're a team. I'm excited to see where this podcast goes. I'm excited to serve. We're excited for your podcast. If you are thinking about starting a podcast and you just want to chat, you want a quick consultation call, please send us a DM. Let us know. We'd be glad to help you. Stay connected this month. All month long, we are talking about podcasting. You don't want to miss it. Hit subscribe, hit follow, share, all the things. And we are so excited to see you on the next episode, because here we
dream media.